So the second question comes from Eva. Is Eva here? Nope. Okay, well, hopefully Eva will get to watch the film. How can we improve the accessibility of being sustainable when it often comes with a significant financial cost? A few examples are paying for solar panels, special eco-friendly products, electric cars, and insulation, particularly in listed housing stock, which touches on the last point. I'd like actually to come to Ian, because that might be something that you get asked about in your work.
I get asked about it a lot, because most of my clients are small businesses, and that's, cash is always at the forefront of their minds. I think it is a very important question. I think, going back to some of the earlier points, we need a more long-term view and a more consensus view. So I think we need to see access to funding that goes beyond, ideally beyond the life of one parliament, and I think long-term thinking that says, we're going to make funds available to introduce the right technologies or so on, and know that that's not going to suddenly be taken away in 6 months' time. How that can happen is perhaps a question more for the realms of the politicians, but I certainly applaud the question. I think it's a critical question that we need to try to find an answer to.
Thank you. Pass to Tabi. So Tabi, how can we improve the accessibility of being sustainable when cost is such a factor?
Yeah, it's a really good question, honestly, because the thing is that it's easy to say that the Green Party are naive and that we're just making loads of really unreasonable demands that aren't based in an economic reality. But ultimately, I kind of feel as though green investment is always going to be like good debt. I mean, it's a mortgage on a house, really, for those home owners out there. The thing is that it's actually, dealing with the climate crisis can be like dealing with Brexit. It is something that is all-encompassing. It's something that's systemic. And we can kind of meet the same sort of similar challenges just by the right funding in the right place. I think it's important to be quite critical about the idea about growth, like economic growth, because it needs to be the right kind of growth in some ways. Like, are you thinking about, the growth of, for instance, if you kind of have, I'm trying to think about something that's not too contentious an issue, but are you kind of thinking about growth that's kind of based in unsustainable business practices? Or are you thinking about growth that's kind of based in, more ethical, more sustainable, more helpful, like socially helpful practices? So we kind of want to make sure that, the norm becomes what's sustainable, and you're not going out of your way to find the right pension scheme, the right mortgage fund, the right bank account. I think that some of the hardest hitting things that we can do as an individual is to change how our banking is done, for instance, and just try and make sure that we're not investing irresponsibly in something that's very harmful. But otherwise, I completely understand it's very overwhelming, and you have to think about, you kind of have to ground yourself in what human capacity is to deal with this. I think that this is why collective change is so vital, because it's actually making an egalitarian cause. Instead of just having individual actions to things, we're actually coming together as a community. So I don't think that can be understated, really, in terms of importance.
Thank you, Tabi. Can we go down to Alex?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Max. Look, I think Eva's absolutely got to the heart of it. So if you look at the Cheltenham constituency, which everyone here, by you on the end, are interested in representing, so there are 18 wards at present. Of those 18 wards, it's worth reflecting that 3 of them are in the bottom decile of income per capita, not just anywhere in Gloucestershire, not just anywhere in the southwest of England, not just anywhere in England, anywhere in the United Kingdom. Right? Now, that's an extraordinary fact, and anybody who aspires to take on this role must have a plan for how you are going to look after people who sometimes come from deprived backgrounds and do so in a way that is equitable. And so, in that context, we have to work out what is the right pace to proceed at a way which balances the competing considerations. And just to put it in context, as I said, we're about 1% of global emissions. I was saying earlier that, in fact, we're doing quite well today because it's a windy day. So here's the thing. So at the moment, we're generating 28.5 gigawatts. In the last year alone, China has added 42 gigawatts in additional coal-fired electricity power generation. So just in 1 year, in coal-fired power stations, the entirety of the UK. And so we have to think, right, well, the reality is, although we should show leadership, absolutely right we should show leadership, but the reality is unless the mega emitters help, then we are going to be in difficulties. So we have to strike the balance, remembering some of those deprived communities. So what is that balance? We think that the balance is to set out a heat and buildings strategy, £3.9 billion. That includes a £1.6 billion for 133,000 low-income households to ensure that they can be better insulated. It also means that £7,500 will go as a grant to people for ground source or air source heat pumps. That means that we should get up to a level of 600,000 per annum. Now, heat pumps, it's an old technology, it's 19th century technology, as you know, it's a fridge in reverse, basically, but it's not necessarily right for every property, but we think that's the right balance. So 3.9 billion, let's get to 68% reduction on CO2 levels. That will be faster than America, which is at 0, by the way, faster than France, faster than Germany, faster than Canada, Australia, all these nations. We spend the money, we do what is affordable, but we make sure we do not load unaffordable costs on some of the most deprived people in our community. Because if we do so, we will lose the argument, and that would be a disaster for our planet.
Thank you. Can we go to Max, please? And then Julie, if you wouldn't mind being last.
Thank you. I identified a lot with what Tabi was saying at the beginning. I think we can't afford not to do this, and there are a lot of people who feel like they would like to do more, but then they look at how much it costs to buy an electric vehicle, because that's something that is put out there in the media as a thing that you can do, and it's prohibitive for most families in Cheltenham. And even though we have some of the poorest communities in the region, we also have some of the richest communities in the region as well. But this, for me, comes down to whether the government is fully committed to the things that it says it's committed to doing. If the government isn't committed enough to intervene in the market and continue with that intervention over a long period of time, then the signal will be sent to business that business shouldn't invest. And that's one of the real risks that we now have as a result of some of the statements that have been made fairly recently. Now, the point is that green investment now means that we'll pay now, but we'll pay less later on. Because the longer-term costs of dealing with climate change, and in Gloucestershire we know about how much it costs to deal with widespread flooding and wide-scale flooding, the longer-term costs are going to be absolutely astronomical. And those poorer people living in our poorer communities, the people who are in most need of support from local government and national government and their local councillors and their local representatives, they will be done a disservice if in the longer term decisions that have been made now to roll back on some of our commitments are taken. So it's really important that when we do get to whenever the election is taking place, we have that at the forefront of our mind, because we have to vote in a climate positive way, because it will cost us a lot more later, even though the shorter term costs seem like they might be difficult to bear. And that doesn't mean forcing everyone to have an electric vehicle, doesn't mean forcing everyone to get rid of their gas boiler. It means having a just transition at the soonest possible time. The technology is already there, we know it's there, and we just need the government to commit to being willing to allow the private sector and the state sector to invest in it.
Thank you. Would you pass to Julie? Thank you, Julie.
Yes, thank you. Well, that's a good lead into where Labour, I think, is looking to develop on this. Because the plan that we have, the Green Investment Plan, is looking exactly at that and encouraging working with private partners, private industry. They're ready to go. They're waiting for the green light to get on with it, to develop all the different technologies that we need. But at the same time, recognising that we have a situation in the country now where, I mean, it's interesting that Alex can just say, we have these 3 deprived wards. They've been in power for 14 years. Why are we still in this situation? Why do we still have 4,000 children in Cheltenham living in poverty? So, yes, there's a balance to be found, but I suspect our answer would be slightly different as to where that balance should sit. So one of the things we have to do is looking at ways that those people on low incomes, A, can find work and working situations that improve their situation, And we will be looking at, for example, in those industrialised areas where jobs are needed, to invest in those industries. We're not going to let, what happened to the Welsh mining valleys, for example, happen again. As we change to a green economy, we'll make sure that new jobs are there for communities. But also, the idea of working at community level is also to create cooperative opportunities where people, as part of their local community, benefit from things like heat networks. So thinking about how to incorporate people's needs without them having to find the money themselves. The other thing, we're talking about buying electric cars. A lot of people don't have a car in Cheltenham and in many other parts of the country. And if they had better public transport services, they would feel less deprived by that lack. So we need to shift everybody away from the expectation that they get around town in a car. Let's have good public transport. We used to have much better public transport. It's suffered a lot over the last 14 years, and it's time we really got back to that with green vehicles and frequent services, integrated public transport services, so that people on lower incomes are not disadvantaged in any way by that situation.
Thank you very much.